The homeless black boy stood silently outside the glass entrance of Hayes Global Tower, one of the most powerful corporate buildings in Chicago. Rain poured from the night sky, soaking his thin hoodie and worn backpack. People rushed past him without a second glance. To them, he looked like just another homeless teenager trying to escape the cold. But Malik Johnson wasn't there for shelter. He was there because of a promise his father made 3 weeks before disappearing without a trace. The security guards had already asked him to leave twice. Yet he remained, waiting, watching, refusing to move. Then suddenly, a convoy of black SUVs rolled up to the entrance. The guards immediately straightened their posture. Employees stepped aside, and out stepped Victoria Hayes, billionaire CEO, one of the richest women in America. A woman whose name appeared on magazine covers, television interviews, and billion-dollar business deals. She was surrounded by executives and security personnel when Malik stepped forward. "Ma'am," he called out. Nobody paid attention. Then he said something that made Victoria stop walking. "My father told me to find you if he ever disappeared." The words cut through the noise like a knife. Victoria slowly turned around. For the first time, her eyes landed on the soaked teenager. The boy reached into his backpack. Security immediately moved toward him. "Don't!" he shouted. His voice cracked. Not from fear, from desperation. He pulled out an old sealed envelope. The paper was faded, the edges were worn, and written across the front were 2 words that made Victoria's heart nearly stop. Victoria Hayes. She hadn't seen that handwriting in over 20 years. Her hands trembled as she took the envelope. "Who is your father?" she asked quietly. The boy swallowed hard, then looked directly into her eyes. "Marcus Johnson." The color instantly drained from Victoria's face, because Marcus Johnson wasn't just an old friend. He was the man who had vanished 20 years ago after helping build the foundation of her billion-dollar empire. And according to every official record, Marcus Johnson was supposed to be dead. What Victoria didn't know was that the envelope contained a secret powerful enough to destroy her company, expose a betrayal hidden for decades, and reveal why someone had spent years trying to erase Marcus Johnson from existence. And now, the only person standing between the truth and a deadly cover-up was a homeless black boy carrying his father's final message. The drive across Chicago took nearly 40 minutes. Rain continued to fall against the windshield as Victoria sat in the back seat beside Malik. Neither spoke much. The city lights blurred past the windows. Victoria's thoughts remained fixed on one person, Marcus Johnson. For 25 years, she had believed he was gone forever. Now she was following a trail he had created, a trail that had somehow survived decades. Finally, the black SUV turned onto an old industrial street. Most of the warehouses had been abandoned years ago. Others had been converted into apartments and storage facilities. But one building remained exactly as Victoria remembered, the warehouse where Hayes Global had begun. The place where 2 ambitious dreamers had once worked 16-hour days chasing impossible goals. The SUV stopped. Victoria stepped out first. Malik followed. The building looked forgotten by time. Broken windows, faded brick walls, rust covering the old metal doors. Yet the moment Victoria saw it, memories flooded back. The first investor meeting. The first contract. The first major success. And Marcus standing beside her through all of it. "Is this it?" Malik asked. Victoria nodded. "This is where everything started." They entered through a side door. Dust covered the floor. The air smelled old and stale. Their flashlights cut through the darkness. Security Chief Marcus Reed followed several steps behind. His eyes constantly scanned the building. Professional, alert, silent. Victoria walked toward what had once been their office. The room was smaller than she remembered. An old desk remained against one wall. Several filing cabinets sat untouched. Everything felt frozen in time. Then she remembered something. The photograph. Malik looked at her. "What about it?" Victoria pulled it from her coat. The warehouse behind them in the picture looked almost identical. Almost. Then she noticed something. The photograph showed a large company logo painted on the wall. That logo no longer existed. Instead, the wall had been covered by metal panels. Victoria approached slowly. Her pulse quickened. "Help me move this." Malik immediately stepped forward. Together they pushed one of the panels aside. A loud scraping sound echoed through the warehouse. Behind it was another wall. And in that wall, a small metal safe. Malik stared. No way. Victoria smiled faintly. That's Marcus. The safe required a combination. Victoria examined it carefully. Then she froze. 3 numbers had been scratched faintly into the metal. Mutta. Her eyes widened. August 17, 1992, the day Hayes Global officially became a company. The day she and Marcus signed the founding documents. Hands trembling slightly, she entered the numbers. A click echoed. The safe opened. Inside was a black folder, a flash drive, and several photographs. Victoria removed the folder first. The cover contained only 2 words. Read first. She opened it. The first page made her stomach drop. It contained bank transfers, millions of dollars, dozens of accounts, fake companies, offshore transactions. The dates stretched back nearly 20 years. What is it? Malik asked. Victoria looked up. Evidence. Evidence of what? Before she could answer, another page slipped free. A name appeared at the top. Victoria felt the blood drain from her face, because she recognized it immediately. Richard Kane. Richard Kane wasn't just anyone. He was her business partner, her closest advisor, the man who had helped run Hayes Global for nearly 2 decades, the man she trusted more than almost anyone. No, she whispered. Malik noticed her expression. You know him? Victoria nodded slowly, too slowly. The realization hit her like a freight train. Marcus's letter. Trust no one, especially not the people closest to you. Suddenly those words carried terrifying meaning. Behind them, Marcus Reed stepped forward. What did you find? Victoria instinctively closed the folder. Something felt wrong. Not about the evidence, about the timing, about everything. Her instincts had kept her alive in business for 40 years, and right now those instincts were screaming. Marcus Reed noticed her hesitation. A strange silence filled the room. Then his phone vibrated. Just once, a message. For a split second, Victoria saw panic flash across his face. Then it disappeared, too quickly, almost as if it had never happened. But she had seen it. And so had Malik. The boy's eyes narrowed, watching, studying, just like his father. Marcus Reed slipped the phone back into his pocket. We should leave, he said, immediately. Victoria didn't answer. Instead, she looked toward Malik. The boy gave the smallest shake of his head, barely noticeable, but enough. Enough to tell her he felt it too. Something wasn't right. Someone knew they were here. Then a loud crash echoed from somewhere deeper inside the warehouse. Everyone turned. Another crash followed, closer this time. The sound of metal striking concrete. Marcus Reed immediately reached for his radio. Who's there? No response. Only silence. Then footsteps. Slow, deliberate, moving through the darkness toward them. Malik's heartbeat hammered. Victoria gripped the folder tighter. The footsteps stopped. For several seconds, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then a voice emerged from the darkness. A voice Victoria had not heard in over 20 years. A voice she would have recognized anywhere. We need to leave, right now. Victoria froze. The folder nearly slipped from her hands. Because there, emerging from the shadows of the warehouse, stood a man older, thinner, and grayer than she remembered. But unmistakably the same. Marcus Johnson, alive. And judging by the fear in his eyes, someone was already hunting them. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Victoria simply stared. The man standing before her looked older than the Marcus she remembered. His hair had turned gray. Deep lines marked his face. Years of stress and hiding had clearly taken their toll. But it was him, without question. Marcus, she whispered. A faint smile appeared on his face. Hello, Victoria. Malik was already moving. Dad! The boy crossed the room in seconds. Marcus wrapped his arms around his son, holding him tightly. For several moments, neither of them said a word. The reunion carried the weight of weeks of fear, uncertainty, and sleepless nights. Finally, Marcus stepped back. You did exactly what I told you. Malik nodded. I found her. You did. For the first time since entering the warehouse, Marcus looked relieved, but the relief didn't last. His eyes immediately shifted toward Marcus Reed, the security chief. And something changed in his expression. Something serious. Something worried. Why is he here? Marcus Johnson asked. Victoria frowned. He's my head of security. Marcus's face hardened. That's a problem. The warehouse became silent. Marcus Reed stepped forward. What exactly is that supposed to mean? Marcus Johnson ignored him. Instead, he looked directly at Victoria. The people helping Richard Kane have someone inside your security division. Victoria felt her stomach tighten. What? I spent years tracking them. Marcus pulled a folded document from inside his jacket. I didn't know who it was until recently. Victoria took the paper. Her eyes moved across several names. Then she froze. One name was circled. Marcus Reed. The security chief's expression changed instantly. Gone was the calm professionalism. Gone was the confidence. For a brief second, panic appeared. Then anger. You don't know what you're talking about. Marcus Johnson stepped closer. I know exactly what I'm talking about. Victoria's heart pounded. She looked at Marcus Reed. The man had worked for her for 8 years. She trusted him completely. But then she remembered something. The strange phone message. His nervous reaction. His insistence on leaving immediately. Suddenly the pieces started fitting together. Marcus, Victoria said quietly. Tell me he's lying. The security chief remained silent. And that silence was answer enough. Everything happened fast. Marcus Reed suddenly turned and ran, straight toward a side exit. Stop him, Victoria shouted. But Marcus Johnson was already moving. Despite his age, he reached the doorway first. Marcus Reed crashed into him. Both men slammed against the wall. The folder of evidence nearly flew from Victoria's hands. Malik rushed forward. Together, Marcus Johnson and Malik managed to block the exit long enough for local police officers, already called by Marcus earlier, to arrive. Within minutes, Marcus Reed was in handcuffs. As officers escorted him away, he glared at Marcus Johnson. You should have stayed hidden. Marcus said nothing, but Victoria heard the threat, and so did everyone else. After the police left, the warehouse fell quiet once again. Only 3 people remained. Victoria, Marcus, Malik, the original team, in a strange way. Victoria looked at the evidence folder, then at Marcus. 25 years. Marcus nodded. I know. You could have contacted me. I wanted to. Then why didn't you? Marcus lowered his eyes. Because Richard Kane controlled too much. Every time I got close, another piece of evidence disappeared. Another witness changed their story. He paused. I was afraid. Victoria had never heard Marcus Johnson say those words before. Not once. I thought if I came back too early, they'd destroy everything. He looked toward Malik. I wasn't worried about myself. A heavy silence followed. You were worried about him, Victoria said. Marcus nodded. Every day. Victoria slowly opened the evidence folder again. Now she understood the truth. This was bigger than fraud. Bigger than money. People had spent decades protecting secrets, and now those secrets were finally exposed. But one question still remained. The most important question of all. What happens next? Malik asked. Marcus and Victoria exchanged a look. Neither liked the answer. Because Richard Kane had not been arrested yet. And once he learned that Marcus Johnson was alive, the real battle would begin. The next morning, Hayes Global was no longer just a successful corporation. It was a company standing on the edge of a storm. Victoria Hayes arrived at headquarters before sunrise. For the first time in years, she wasn't thinking about quarterly reports, investor meetings, or expansion plans. She was thinking about one thing. Richard Kane. For nearly 20 years, he had sat beside her in board meetings. He had attended charity galas. He had shaken hands with investors. He had spoken about loyalty, ethics, and leadership, all while secretly stealing from the company they had built. And now he knew the truth was coming, which made him dangerous, very dangerous. At 7:15 a.m., Victoria entered the executive conference room. Only a handful of people had been invited. Her chief legal officer, the head of compliance, 2 federal investigators, Marcus Johnson and Malik. The evidence collected over 25 years was spread across the table, thousands of pages. Financial records, witness statements, transaction histories, offshore account details. The investigators spent nearly an hour reviewing the material. Finally, one of them leaned back in his chair. This is one of the most complete fraud cases I've ever seen. Marcus remained silent. Victoria looked toward him. 25 years. 25 years of collecting evidence while living in the shadows. The sacrifice suddenly felt impossible to comprehend. The investigator continued. Once we file this officially, Richard Kane won't be able to stop what's coming. Marcus nodded. Good. The investigator closed the folder. We'll move immediately. Meanwhile, Richard Kane was already fighting for survival. News of the investigation had begun leaking. Financial reporters were calling. Board members were demanding answers. Investors were becoming nervous. For the first time in decades, Richard was losing control, and he hated it. Inside his penthouse office, he slammed a newspaper onto his desk. The headline was simple: Hayes Global investigating internal fraud. Richard's phone rang. It was one of his attorneys. The situation is getting worse. Richard's jaw tightened. What now? We just confirmed something. A pause followed. Then came the words he feared most. Marcus Johnson is alive. Silence. Richard felt the blood drain from his face. That's impossible. I'm afraid it isn't. For several seconds, Richard said nothing. Then he slowly lowered the phone, because he understood exactly what this meant. The one man capable of destroying him had returned. 3 days later, federal agents arrived. Search warrants were executed. Documents were seized. Accounts were frozen. Richard Kane's entire network began collapsing. Executives who had once protected him suddenly started cooperating. Former associates began talking. Witnesses who had remained silent for years finally came forward. The walls were closing in, fast, very fast. Then came the moment nobody expected. Richard requested a meeting with Victoria. The meeting took place inside a federal conference room. Victoria sat on one side of the table. Richard sat on the other. For a long moment, neither spoke. Finally, Richard sighed. You know, I actually respected you. Victoria stared at him. That's supposed to mean something? Richard leaned back. It means I never wanted this. Victoria almost laughed. You stole millions. I protected the company. You protected yourself. The smile disappeared from Richard's face. For the first time, the mask cracked. The charming businessman vanished. What remained was something colder, something uglier. You think Marcus is a hero? Richard asked. Victoria remained silent. He destroyed his own life chasing this. He saved mine. Richard shook his head. No, he couldn't let go. Victoria stood. The conversation was over. No, Richard. She looked directly into his eyes. The difference between you and Marcus is simple. Richard frowned. What's that? Victoria answered without hesitation. Marcus was willing to lose everything to protect the truth. She turned toward the door. You were willing to destroy everyone else to hide it. Then she walked away. The legal process lasted months, but the outcome became clear quickly. Richard Kane eventually accepted a federal plea agreement. Several co-conspirators were arrested. Millions of dollars were recovered. The company survived, stronger than before, because the corruption had finally been removed. For Victoria, however, the most important victory wasn't financial. It was personal. Winter arrived in Chicago. Snow covered the city. Life slowly returned to normal. One evening, Victoria stood inside her home watching snow fall outside. Across the room sat Malik, doing homework, arguing with a math problem, exactly the way Marcus used to. The similarity made her smile. A few feet away, Marcus himself sat reading through a stack of papers. For the first time in years, he looked peaceful. The constant fear was gone. The constant vigilance had finally ended. Victoria walked over and handed him a cup of coffee. Marcus looked up. Still terrible coffee? Victoria smiled. Some traditions should survive. For the first time in decades, they laughed together. Not as billionaire and investigator. Not as survivors of a conspiracy. But as two old friends who had finally found their way back. Later that night, Malik stood near the fireplace. He looked toward his father, then toward Victoria. Can I ask something? Victoria nodded. Of course. Malik hesitated, then spoke quietly. Why did you help me? The room fell silent. Victoria thought about the rainy night outside Hayes Global, the soaked teenager, the envelope, the promise. Then she looked at Malik. Because your father trusted me. She smiled. And because no child should have to carry a burden that heavy alone. Malik nodded slowly. The answer seemed enough. Months later, a photograph was placed inside the Hayes Global headquarters. Not in a hidden office, not inside a private collection, but in the main lobby where everyone could see it. The photograph showed 3 people, Victoria Hayes, Marcus Johnson, and Malik Johnson, standing together, smiling. Below the frame was a simple inscription. Truth survives when courageous people refuse to abandon it. Every employee who entered the building passed that photograph. Most never knew the full story, but Victoria did. Marcus did. And Malik certainly did. Because sometimes a homeless boy carrying a forgotten envelope doesn't just change his own future. Sometimes he changes everyone's.